There are moments in life when a name echoes in your mind without warning. You try to distract yourself. You try to move forward. You convince your logic that the chapter is closed, and yet something deeper refuses to be silenced. You call it coincidence. You call it nostalgia. But what if it is neither? What if the repetition is not weakness but revelation? Sometimes a soul remains connected to yours not because of attachment, but because of unfinished meaning. Not every person who leaves your physical world leaves your psychological world. Some individuals are woven into the architecture of your becoming. They represent a lesson, a mirror, a wound, or even a hidden strength that has not yet fully awakened within you. When you keep seeing reminders, their name, their birthday, familiar symbols, memories resurfacing at strange hours, it is not necessarily about romance. It is about integration. The psyche does not cling without reason. It returns to what still carries energy. And energy unfinished becomes destiny delayed. You may have separated because timing was immature. You may have walked away because fear disguised itself as logic. You may have believed distance meant closure. But destiny is not always about permanent union. It is about necessary transformation. Some people are assigned to your life, not to stay forever, but to shape you so profoundly that your path cannot unfold without their imprint. If this message finds you at a time when you are questioning whether to fully let go or to reconsider, understand this: destiny does not operate through obsession. It operates through growth. If thinking of them pulls you backward into insecurity, it is attachment. If thinking of them pushes you toward maturity, responsibility, and self-awareness, it is alignment. There are connections that activate your shadow, jealousy, fear of abandonment, possessiveness. But shadow activation is not punishment. It is invitation. The people who disturb you most deeply often carry the key to your undiscovered self. They awaken dormant parts of you. They force you to confront who you are beneath performance. Perhaps this person is still part of your destiny because your story with him is not about possession, but evolution. You were meant to meet to reveal truths about love, power, boundaries, and self-worth. Maybe reconciliation is written. Maybe only inner closure is written. But either way, the connection served and may still serve a sacred function. The question is not whether they are meant for you forever. The question is, what is this connection teaching you now? Destiny is dynamic. It shifts as you shift. If both souls grow, paths can reunite at a higher level. If only one grows, destiny becomes a lesson rather than a partnership. Do not confuse intensity with purpose. But also, do not dismiss repetition without reflection. When a connection refuses to fade despite time and distance, it deserves conscious examination. Silence can hide denial just as easily as it hides divine timing. If this person remains in your inner world, ask yourself, have I integrated the lesson? Have I healed the wound? Have I forgiven? Have I evolved beyond who I was when we first met? Because sometimes destiny is not about them returning. It is about you becoming. And when you become, clarity arrives. Either the path leads you back to each other in strength and awareness, or it releases you fully without resistance. In both outcomes, destiny has fulfilled its purpose. Nothing real is ever lost. What is truly meant for your growth will return in form, in memory, or in wisdom, until the transformation is complete. When a person continues to reappear in your thoughts, dreams, or daily experiences, it is rarely random. The human psyche does not repeat what has been fully processed. Repetition is a signal. It is the mind's way of saying that something remains unresolved, unintegrated, or emotionally charged. We often try to dismiss recurring thoughts as weakness or nostalgia, yet psychologically, repetition carries meaning. It points toward unfinished inner work. The mind is designed to seek closure. When an experience ends abruptly, when words are left unsaid, or when emotions are suppressed rather than understood, the psyche stores that energy. It does not disappear simply because time passes. Instead, it resurfaces in cycles. You may hear their name unexpectedly, dream about them without warning, or find your mind drifting back during quiet moments. These patterns are not accidents. They are echoes of unresolved emotional energy. Repetition also reveals attachment to identity. Sometimes it is not the person you miss, but the version of yourself that existed with them. Perhaps you felt more alive, more vulnerable, more powerful, or even more broken. When someone activates a deep part of your personality, The psyche links them to that internal state. If that part of you has not been fully integrated, your mind returns to the symbol, the person, as a gateway to unfinished self-discovery. There is also the phenomenon of projection. We often project unrecognized aspects of ourselves onto others. If someone embodied qualities you secretly desired, confidence, freedom, emotional intensity, you may unconsciously associate them with those traits. The repetition of their image in your mind can signal a need to reclaim those qualities within yourself, rather than seek them externally. The psyche repeats until you recognize what it is trying to teach. Emotionally charged experiences imprint deeply on memory. The brain prioritizes what carries strong emotional weight, whether positive or painful. This is why relationships marked by intensity, conflict, or passion tend to replay internally. The repetition is not proof of destiny or fate, it is proof of impact. The deeper the emotional imprint, the stronger the neural pathway. Without conscious reflection, the mind loops through these pathways automatically. Avoidance strengthens repetition. When you try to suppress thoughts forcefully, they often return with greater intensity. Psychological resistance feeds the cycle. True resolution requires acknowledgement. Instead of pushing the thought away, examining it with honesty can dissolve its grip. What exactly does this person represent? Is it regret, longing, guilt, admiration, or unexpressed truth? Naming the emotion weakens the repetition because awareness integrates what avoidance fragments. Repetition can also function as a call toward growth. The psyche brings unfinished material back into awareness so it can be processed at a higher level of maturity. You may not be the same person you were when the connection first occurred. Seeing it again through a new lens can transform the meaning entirely. What once felt like loss may reveal itself as preparation. What once felt like rejection may expose your own fear. Psychological repetition is not about clinging to the past, it is about completing it. When lesson is fully integrated, the emotional charge fades naturally. The memory may remain, but it loses urgency. The mind stops knocking because the door has finally been opened. We are often taught to think of destiny as ownership, as if certain people are meant to belong to us forever. We equate fate with permanence and connection with possession. Yet growth rarely follows the logic of ownership. True destiny is not about holding someone in your life at all costs. It is about who you become because they entered your life at all. When we approach relationships with the mindset of possession, fear quietly takes control. We fear losing them, being replaced, or not being enough to keep them. That fear creates control, attachment, and emotional dependency. But growth requires freedom. It requires space for two individuals to evolve, sometimes together and sometimes apart. Destiny, when understood deeply, is less about securing a person and more about allowing transformation. Some people enter your life as catalysts. They disrupt your comfort, challenge your beliefs, and expose insecurities you did not know existed. At first, this feels threatening. You may interpret the discomfort as incompatibility or instability, but often what feels like instability is actually expansion. Growth is rarely comfortable because it dismantles the familiar version of who you thought you were. Possession focuses on keeping the connection intact. Growth focuses on understanding why the connection appeared in the first place. Instead of asking, how do I make them stay? Growth asks, what is this teaching me? That shift in perspective changes everything. It moves you from fear to awareness. It transforms the relationship from a battlefield of control into a mirror of self-discovery. There are connections that awaken parts of you that have been dormant for years. You may discover deeper vulnerability, stronger boundaries, hidden jealousy, or unexpected courage. These awakenings are not accidents. They are invitations to evolve. Destiny uses people as instruments of psychological and spiritual development. Whether they remain physically present is secondary to the internal transformation they ignite. When you release the need to possess, love becomes cleaner. It no longer demands constant reassurance. It no longer suffocates under expectation. You begin to understand that if a connection is meant to continue, it will do so through mutual growth, not forced attachment. And if it is meant to end, its purpose was fulfilled through the lessons it delivered. Clinging often delays growth. When we refuse to let a situation change, we resist the very evolution destiny is guiding us toward. Sometimes separation is not a sign of failure, but a necessary phase of development. Two individuals may need distance to mature independently before they can meet again at a higher level of awareness. Or they may need to walk entirely different paths, carrying forward the wisdom gained from their time together. Growth-centered destiny also requires responsibility. It asks you to examine your patterns, your fears, and your projections. Instead of blaming the other person for the outcome, you reflect on your own evolution. What did this connection reveal about your emotional habits? Where did you abandon yourself? Where did you grow stronger? These questions shift the focus inward, where true destiny unfolds. When you understand destiny as growth rather than possession, love becomes less about control and more about consciousness. You stop measuring connection by duration and start measuring it by depth. You realize that some of the most transformative relationships are not the longest ones, but the ones that reshape your inner world permanently. In the end, destiny is fulfilled not when you successfully keep someone, but when you fully become yourself. There are people who enter your life and immediately stir something uncomfortable within you. They trigger jealousy, insecurity, anger, obsession, or deep longing. You may label these reactions as signs that something is wrong with the connection. Yet psychologically intense emotional activation is rarely random. When someone awakens powerful reactions in you, it often signals that they are touching parts of yourself that you have kept hidden. This is shadow activation, and it is not a curse. It is an invitation. The shadow consists of the traits, desires, fears, and impulses that you have pushed out of conscious awareness. These aspects are not inherently negative. Many of them were simply judged unacceptable at some point in your life. Perhaps you were taught that anger is dangerous, that vulnerability is weakness, or that ambition is selfish. Instead of integrating these qualities in a healthy way, you buried them. But what is buried does not disappear. It waits. When someone activates your shadow, they become a mirror. You may accuse them of being controlling, yet secretly you struggle with your own need for control. You may feel threatened by their independence, revealing your own fear of abandonment. You may resent their confidence because it exposes your hidden insecurity. The intensity you feel toward them is often proportional to the depth of what they reflect back to you. This activation can feel overwhelming. The ego prefers stability and predictability. Shadow work disrupts both. You may experience inner conflict. Part of you is drawn toward the person, while another part wants to escape. This tension exists because growth demands integration. The qualities you reject in yourself will continue to appear externally until you face them consciously. Instead of asking, why are they making me feel this way? A more transformative question is, what part of me is being revealed right now? This shift in perspective turns emotional turmoil into psychological insight. It moves you from blame to self-awareness. The person who triggers you becomes less of an enemy and more of a catalyst. Shadow activation is also an invitation to reclaim lost power. Many suppressed traits carry strength within them. Healthy anger becomes assertiveness. Acknowledged desire becomes passion. Recognized fear becomes courage. When you integrate the shadow, you no longer project it outward. You become more whole, more balanced, and less reactive. However, integration requires honesty. It demands that you sit with uncomfortable truths about yourself. It asks you to admit envy, insecurity, possessiveness, or pride without self-condemnation. The goal is not to shame these qualities, but to understand their origins. Often they were formed as protection mechanisms during vulnerable periods of your life. Recognizing this allows compassion to replace judgment. Not every triggering connection is meant to last. Some people arrive solely to awaken what has been dormant. Once the lesson is integrated, the emotional intensity often softens. What once felt chaotic begins to feel clear. You respond rather than react. You choose rather than cling. Shadow activation is an invitation to maturity. It calls you to expand beyond the narrow version of yourself that felt safe but incomplete. The people who disturb your peace most deeply may be the ones guiding you toward inner wholeness. If you accept the invitation, what once felt like emotional turbulence can become the doorway to profound self-knowledge and authentic strength. Two people can feel a powerful connection and still fail to sustain it, not because the bond lacked depth, but because timing and maturity were misaligned. We often romanticize the idea that if something is meant to be, it will effortlessly work. Yet growth does not always happen simultaneously. Emotional readiness is not determined by chemistry. It is determined by self-awareness, responsibility, and inner stability. Timing shapes how we interpret love. When we meet someone during a period of insecurity, we may cling rather than connect. When we meet them during a phase of ego-driven ambition, we may prioritize validation over vulnerability. The same connection encountered at a different stage of personal development can unfold in an entirely different way, Who you are internally determines how you experience externally. Maturity is not about age, it is about integration. It is the ability to communicate instead of withdraw, to reflect instead of react, to take responsibility instead of blame. Without this foundation, even the strongest attraction can collapse under misunderstanding. Two people may deeply care for one another, but if one avoids difficult conversations while the other seeks emotional clarity, friction becomes inevitable. It is not the absence of love that creates distance, it is the absence of aligned growth. Sometimes separation is not a failure, but a pause imposed by psychological necessity. One person may need to confront unresolved trauma. The other may need to develop independence. When inner wounds dominate behavior, relationships become battlegrounds for projection. In such cases, timing protects both individuals from reinforcing unhealthy patterns. Distance allows space for individual evolution. We often misinterpret not now as never. Yet life unfolds in cycles. A connection that felt chaotic at one stage may become balanced later, if both individuals commit to self-development. However, this possibility depends on genuine transformation, not nostalgia. Riveting a relationship without growth simply repeats the same outcome in a different form. Maturity also involves recognizing when timing will never align. Sometimes two people are meant to influence each other profoundly, but walk separate paths afterward. Accepting this requires emotional strength. It means valuing the lesson without forcing the continuation. Growth includes knowing when to release with gratitude instead of clinging out of fear. When timing and maturity align, connection feels different. There is less urgency and more clarity. Communication becomes direct rather than manipulative. Boundaries are respected rather than tested. Love shifts from emotional intensity to conscious choice. This kind of alignment cannot be rushed. It emerges naturally when both individuals have confronted their own shadows and insecurities. It is important to understand that maturity is an ongoing process. No one reaches a final state of emotional perfection. However, there is a significant difference between someone unwilling to grow and someone actively working on themselves. Timing often reflects readiness to take responsibility for one's inner world. When you reflect on a connection that did not survive, consider not only what went wrong between you, but who you both were at that time. Were you seeking completion from each other instead of standing whole individually? Were you reacting from fear rather than responding from awareness? These questions reveal whether the separation was about incompatibility or about incomplete development. Timing and maturity do not diminish the authenticity of a connection. They determine its capacity to endure. When both are present, relationships become spaces of mutual expansion rather than emotional survival. Alignment in any connection is not determined by intensity, history, or even shared dreams. It is determined by reflection. Without reflection, emotions take control and create illusions of compatibility or destiny. With reflection, clarity begins to separate attachment from truth. The ability to pause, observe, and examine your inner responses is what reveals whether a connection supports your evolution or quietly distorts it. When you do not reflect, you react. You interpret longing as love, anxiety as passion, and unpredictability as excitement. But when you step back and honestly examine your emotional state around someone, deeper patterns emerge. Do you feel grounded or constantly uncertain? Do you feel inspired to grow or pressured to perform? Reflection allows you to measure the impact of the connection on your inner stability rather than on your temporary feelings. Alignment is less about how strongly you feel and more about who you are becoming in the presence of that person. If your boundaries weaken, your self-respect declines, or your peace disappears, something is misaligned. Emotional chemistry can mask these signals, which is why reflection is essential. It creates space between stimulus and response, allowing you to choose consciously rather than act impulsively. True reflection requires radical honesty. It asks uncomfortable questions. Are you pursuing them because you genuinely value who they are, or because you fear being alone? Are you fighting for the connection out of love or out of wounded pride? Are you holding on to their potential instead of accepting their reality? These inquiries may challenge your ego, but they illuminate alignment. Reflection also exposes projection. Sometimes we attach meaning to someone because they represent an idea we long for. Security, validation, adventure, or healing. Yet when you reflect deeply, you may realize that what you seek is not the person themselves, but the feeling you associate with them. Alignment occurs when the connection enhances your authentic self, not when it compensates for what you lack internally. There is a difference between growth discomfort and misalignment discomfort. Growth discomfort feels challenging but empowering. It stretches you while maintaining your core stability. Misalignment discomfort feels destabilizing and diminishing. Reflection helps you distinguish between the two. It clarifies whether the tension you feel is leading toward expansion or erosion. When you consistently reflect, you begin to notice patterns in your relational choices. You may recognize that you are drawn to emotionally unavailable individuals or to dynamics that mirror unresolved childhood wounds. Awareness transforms repetition into wisdom. Instead of unconsciously reenacting the same story you interrupted, alignment becomes a conscious decision rather than a familiar habit. Reflection also reveals mutuality. Alignment is not one-sided effort. It requires both individuals to engage in self-examination and accountability. If only one person reflects while the other resists growth, imbalance develops. A connection thrives when both are willing to question themselves, communicate honestly, and evolve. Clarity often replaces fantasy when reflection deepens. What once felt urgent may feel unnecessary. What once felt uncertain may become peaceful. Alignment does not create chaos. It creates coherence. Your values, actions, and emotional responses begin to move in the same direction. Ultimately, reflection is an act of self-respect. It protects you from confusing emotional intensity with genuine compatibility. It ensures that your relationships are not built on fear, projection, or illusion, but on conscious awareness. Through reflection, alignment reveals itself not as a dramatic sign, but as a quiet sense of inner certainty. Destiny is often imagined as an external event, a person arriving, an opportunity appearing, a promise fulfilled. We wait for something outside ourselves to confirm that our path is unfolding correctly, yet the deeper truth is quieter and more demanding. Destiny is not something that happens to you, it is something that happens within you. It is fulfilled not when circumstances align perfectly, but when you become who you were meant to be. Becoming is a process of shedding illusions. It requires you to release identities that once protected you but no longer serve your growth. You outgrow versions of yourself that were built on fear, validation, or survival. This shedding can feel like loss. Relationships may change. Goals may shift. Old dreams may dissolve. But what feels like fragmentation is often integration in progress. You are not losing yourself. You are refining yourself. Many people mistake destiny for possession, a certain partner, a certain status, a certain outcome. But when those things disappear or fail to materialize, they feel abandoned by fate. In reality, destiny is less concerned with what you hold and more concerned with who you embody. If a connection transforms you into someone more conscious, more self-aware, more resilient, then it has served your destiny, regardless of whether it remains. Becoming demands responsibility. You can no longer blame circumstances, timing, or other people for where you stand. You begin to see that every experience, especially the painful ones, contributed to your expansion. Rejection strengthened your independence. Loss deepened your emotional capacity. Conflict forced you to examine your shadow. Each challenge carved out greater depth within you. There is also a shift from seeking validation to seeking authenticity. Earlier versions of you may have pursued approval, fearing abandonment or insignificance. As you evolve, you realize that fulfillment cannot be borrowed from others. It must be generated internally. You stop chasing external confirmation and start aligning your actions with your values. This alignment creates inner stability that no external outcome can threaten. Becoming is not dramatic. It does not always announce itself with grand milestones. Often, it appears in subtle ways, in how you respond rather than react, in how you maintain boundaries without guilt, in how you choose peace over chaos. These quiet transformations signal that you are embodying lessons rather than merely understanding them intellectually. Sometimes destiny fulfills itself through endings. A relationship that once felt essential may dissolve once its purpose has been integrated. A dream you once pursued obsessively may lose its grip when you outgrow the insecurity that fueled it. This is not failure. It is completion. Destiny does not cling to outdated chapters. It evolves as you evolve. The true measure of destiny is not whether everything you wanted remained, but whether you emerge more whole. Wholeness is the integration of light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, ambition and humility. When you become whole, You no longer seek destiny as a future reward. You recognize it as a present reality. In the end, destiny is not fulfilled when you secure a particular outcome. It is fulfilled when you stand firmly in your authentic self, no longer fragmented by fear, no longer defined by the past. Becoming is the quiet realization that you were never waiting for destiny. You were growing into it. And so, if you are still questioning whether this connection, this season, or this longing means something, understand this destiny is not asking you to chase, to force, or to claim. It is asking you to awaken. Every encounter, every separation, every return has one central purpose: to shape you into a deeper, wiser, more conscious version of yourself. If someone is truly part of your destiny, they will meet you at the level of your becoming, not at the level of your fear. And if they fall away, they were never a mistake, they were a milestone. Nothing meaningful is wasted. Every emotion you felt carved strength into your character. Every challenge refined your awareness. Do not measure destiny by who stays. Measure it by who you are now compared to who you were before. If you are stronger, clearer, more self-respecting, more aligned with your truth, then destiny has already been fulfilled in its highest form. Trust the unfolding. Trust the growth. And above all, trust the person you are becoming, because that is where your true destiny has always been waiting.